Well, welcome to Ask Your Herb Doctor. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Good evening.
So here we are, January the 16th, 2026. Can you believe it? Okay, so you're listening to KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM and on the web at KMUD.org. We're also live streaming this program to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, so you can listen right now by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube, or clicking on the clicking on the live stream. It's being live streamed right now. So tonight's radio show is a discussion of the origin of life. And bear with me, folks, because it's going to be a little divergent from... I'm obviously going to get into herbs. That's what the title of the show is, Ask Your Herb Doctor. My wife and I graduated in 1999, and for the last 27 years have been practicing herbal medicine and producing medicinal herb extracts. And we've seen a lot of different things come and go. Lots of fads, lots of diets, lots of, weird and wonderful. And obviously we were guided by Dr. Raymond Peat from 2007 through till Thanksgiving 2022, when he passed away. And he had a very alternative viewpoint, a scientific viewpoint. I want to stress that fact, scientific viewpoint. He was not... he was definitely a spiritual person, but he was not looking at that as his basis for his coming to the conclusions he come to. He was deeply researching things, reading a lot of material, and synthesizing his tenet of where he came from to a fine point. And he wrote many books and published many newsletters and worked with a lot of people, many of which lauded him greatly and said that their lives had been turned around by his recommendations. So just putting that out there in terms of science. So as I was framing up the discussion for tonight, I think we mentioned it last month when we stopped in December of last year, saying that this month we would talk about fertility. I wanted to start sketching it out and to see where it was going to go, and basically titled it The Origins of Life. What I wanted to say was, last month I brought out a discussion about ChatGTP and how actually if you framed your question a certain way, you could in fact get ChatGTP to agree with things that Dr. Peat had said about things that are argued in the mainstream science that are irrefutable. So we were talking about DHT and testosterone last month, and the mainstream view is that DHT is the problem for prostatic hypertrophy and it's something you need to do something about, whereas Dr. Peat said that DHT actually is a very positive end hormone. It can't be shunted into estradiol like testosterone can, and actually for prostate treatment, both in aromatase blocking any endogenous testosterone from becoming DHT use would be useful in prostatic hypertrophy. Okay, so on that basis, that mainstream medical science says the opposite of what Dr. Peat was saying. If you asked something like ChatGTP or Grok AI, its viewpoint, if you don't state things clearly, it will give you the consensus view, which is the mainstream medical view. If you frame your question, and I want to lead anyone listening to this to two URLs that I really encourage you to listen to, not because I want to evangelize or proselytize you into believing that God exists and actually it's not all spontaneous evolution, but because it just shows you there is always another viewpoint. And so obviously I have my beliefs, and those beliefs are firmly set. So when you listen to something like ChatGTP giving you descriptions or giving you formulae and discussing very complex subjects, whether it's advanced algebra or breaking into coding or chemical engineering, it knows a lot. It's obviously been trained on just about everything that's ever been written that's on the internet, that it is trawling day and night tirelessly and at speeds that we can't really comprehend. So I think just safely to say the iterations that have got to where they are now with ChatGPT 4, Grok 4, there's probably going to be a 5 soon. I think they are saying, and consensus opinion is that it's getting very close to digital superintelligence. So this computer, with all the sum total of all the knowledge and the ability to synthesize it and crystallize logical deductions from it and come up with new possibilities, like engineering proteins that we've never been able to make before, or antibodies that we've never been able to produce before as viable curative substances and organisms that will be beneficial in curing cancer, etc., is a very real possibility. Okay, so just put that out there. I think there's incredible benefit that we could derive from it. Obviously, I don't have the blinders on. I obviously think there's a massive amount of control and coercion and steering and direction that can come from it that would not be good for humanity. But I think the potential for the good should always be understood, and I think we can, through our own collective desire, bring that around, because I think the argument against the truth is really not permissible by superintelligence, because the facts outweigh the lie. So when I framed up this morning's sketch up for the show and which way it was going to go and what herbs we were going to discuss, I put origin of life and just framed it that we've now got artificial intelligence and it's digital superintelligence. Shouldn't we be asking it some basic questions to uncover the truth? All the time understanding from my perspective that Pontius Pilate famously asked, quid est veritas, what is truth, right, in his response to Jesus, asking him, you call me the Son of God. He's like, so on that basis, let me just give you some, I just want to give you some numbers that are just mind-blowing. And okay, so I've kind of framed the show starting by discussing digital superintelligence as being extremely intelligent, knowing everything and being able to frame it and come up with logic and answers and irrefutable evidence. So I want you to think of a number. No, I don't want you to think of the number. I want you to try and imagine this number. So the number is 1 times 10 to the 200, okay? Which is a 1 followed by 200 zeros, okay? It's a big number. All right, so you think about a million is 1 to the 10 to the 6, a billion is 10 to the 9, a trillion, etc., etc. So we're talking about 10 to the 200. So let me just give you an idea in everyday terms of what this number is and how you would ever come to this number. And then I'll just quickly give you 2 URLs that I'd like any interested person to take a look at. Won't take you more than 10 or 15 minutes for one. The other one is 30 minutes. If you like the first one, you can take a look at the second one. It just provides even more evidence. But digital superintelligence was asked on the basis, and this is again how I said you have to frame your interaction with these search engines or these large language models, this AI. You have to frame the interaction with it as, especially if you've been using one and you're just doing regular things with it, very basic, or even you think it's maybe pretty scientific but it's pretty basic compared to what it could be used for, that you want to frame your question according to strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science alone, and that you haven't had any interaction with it before that it wants to remember or recapitulate or tone down for your particular academic level of understanding. So, and also that you don't want it to come up with any ideology or belief in God or consensus science, but purely strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science alone. So the number 10, or 1 rather, to 10 to the power of 200. Essentially, to illustrate this, if you put a 1 followed by 200 zeros, we must build up in scale from the atomic level as shown in this example. Now again, this is something that I've searched for this myself, so this is not my bringing this to bear the way I understand it, but this is essentially If you do a search term on 1 times 10 to the 200, it will give you an idea of what this is. So I just wanted to frame it in understandable terms because the numbers are so incomprehensible. So 1. The number of atoms, this is what scientists have come up with the conclusion with. I don't quite know, the universe is infinite, supposedly, right? But anyway, the number of atoms in the universe is 10 to the 80. Okay? So scientists estimate there are roughly 10 to the 80 atoms in the entire observable universe. And when I first said the number 10 to the 200, right, so the entire universe's observable atoms are 10 to the 80. So the scale of 10 to the 200, if you were to fill the entire universe with sand, then count every single atom inside every grain of that sand, you'd only reach approximately 10 to the 80 times 10 to the 18, which is 10 to the 98. We're still a long way short of 10 to the 200. And so while a million, which is 10 to the 6, or a billion, 10 to the 9, relate to the human experience like population or debt, 10 to the 200 exceeds any physical, tangible, or even astronomical quantity in our observable universe. So a 10 to the 100 is actually a Googleplex, and I think this is where Google first got their name. It was such a massive number, and they were thinking that their search engine was going to be such a great thing and going to just probe every corner of the universe, so they called it Google, 1 to the 1000. Well, 10 to the 200 is essentially 10 to the 100 times 10 to the 100. So what I want to say with this number then, 10 to the 200, there's a presenter, a speaker called Calvin Smith, C-A-L-V-I-N. He's a creationist. He studies biblical apologetics, so the reasons why and the arguments for and against. So, he'll give somebody a good discussion if they're atheistic, why they're atheistic and what that means. So anyway, apologetics is that study of that science of understanding and giving a good rational argument for the fors and the againsts. So on July the 30th, 2025, Calvin Smith did a YouTube with Grok 4. Right? This was Elon Musk's version of ChatGPT. Back in 2025, Grok 4 was what was the most advanced AI they had. The title, if you search YouTube for AI on the probability of life's origin, natural emergence versus intelligent design, then you'll find that his dialogue, based on strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science alone, had this digital superintelligence said that the chances of abiogenesis, which is essentially self-assembly from non-organic subunits into the basic and most basic form of life with 200 to 300 base pairs, is essentially 1 to the 10 to the 200, saying it's completely impossible. Then in August, so this was in July, and in fact I kind of found it kind of staggering that it had not too many views. If you look at the hits for it, I think it was just a few hundred. Quite surprised me, because when I listened to it I was like, wow, okay, so this is really important how you frame these questions to ChatGPT, because actually it really is been dedicated and designed to give you the consensus opinion, but it will give you, quote unquote, the truth if you frame it purely according to strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science alone, and leave God out of it, leave religion out of it, ideology, etc., but just purely on the basis of a number crunching computer that, quote unquote, is a digital superintelligence, or is getting very close to it. So a month later, in August 2022 of 2025, Calvin Smith did the same thing with ChatGPT. I think he basically was going through most of the language models that were available at the time to question, and again framed it in those three main points: strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science alone. And again, ChatGPT said essentially God's real, and using strict logic, mathematical probability, and observational science, it was basically impossible for spontaneous life to form. Abiogenesis was just not possible, and that 1 to 10 to 200 was the chances of it actually happening, and that's just to create the first life. That's not to create the human genome and all the myriad of creation that we have on the planet. And that was in 4.5 billion years, if we are to believe that the age of the universe and the Earth is 4.5 billion years. Even given that time frame, it's just completely impossible. So I found that that theory was really quite interesting, and just to say that there's always more than one viewpoint, so you might want to listen to this show and you can go do your own research. I believe in herbs and herbal medicine as being a very fundamental and an excellent form of health giving life, as opposed to drugs and a lot of very questionable medicine. I don't believe it's all bad. Obviously, I'm not one or the other, I'm not black or white. And I choose to look at research, and I choose to use research that produces a drug that's actually very safe and it's actually very good. I think antibiotics are an exceptional example of that. There are many others too. I'm not at all anti-medicine or anti-science. I'm completely pro-science, pro-medicine, but my passion is herbs and growing herbs and using herbal medicine. That's where I trained in England, graduated in 1999 with a degree in herbal medicine. I've been practicing ever since, manufacturing herbal medicines for retail environments and for practitioners, and have a web-based platform, but essentially very science-based. And so when I was studying herbal medicine, we'd get lectures from pharmacologists, from endocrinologists, from biologists, and all the kind of medical people, as well as the botanists and the people that were into the growing side of it and the more natural side of things, the kind of pharmacognosy, the identification of herbs, and materia medica, with all the known knowledge of herbs and what they would be used for. So without me going on any further, I just want to say that I'm very science-based, and Dr. Pete was also very science-based. So he came out with some pretty staggering statements and staggering claims that when we first met him, I was as wildly blown away as the next person who was hearing them, because what he said was completely counterculture, completely opposite of everything that I'd been taught when I was studying herbal medicine, like estrogen is good for you, sugar's bad for you, salt's bad for you, etc., etc. And all of these things have been pretty much turned on their head. And I think you could also, like I said, if you frame it correctly, you can get large language models and Grok and ChatGPT, etc., agreeing with his basic premise and the tenet of his arguments are essentially irrefutable. So the origin of life then, January 16th, 2026. So fertility then, it's the natural ability to conceive, right? We're talking about life and the origins of life. So while fertility issues like infertility mean difficulty getting pregnant after a year, for example, stemming from female, male, or combined factors like age, lifestyle, smoking, body weight, especially related to fatty disposition, alcohol, genetics, sexually transmitted diseases, stress, underlying conditions like PCOS. We've talked about that in the last 4 months or so, talking about male health. This is obviously a female issue, polycystic ovarian syndrome, but endometriosis as another fertility blocker, and then thyroid issues, etc., for metabolism and generative energy production. So I want this month's discussion to go through fertility and infertility. This is both for male and female. I just also want to say that I work with a bunch of clients all over the States based on many different things, and hormones have become my speciality, as they were Dr. Pete's, and his teaching for 12 or so years, working with him and doing radio shows with him, has enabled my viewpoint to more closely align with how he taught and how he saw things, because I find it actually quite irrefutable. So, looking at female factors then, we're just going to go through a list of different things that block fertility. I
actually have a couple cards to read. This is probably
Sure.
a better place to break in.
Let me just quickly say, though, from 7:30 till the end of the show, 8 o'clock, callers are invited to call in 707-923-3911. We'd love to take your calls, and also like to hear from people that are listening what you'd like me to talk about going forward. Go ahead, Michael.
And I was actually going to do it right before the callers, but you just kind of changed gears,
Okay.
so I will jump in with both of them to let you go to the top of the hour as close as we can. Have you made a resolution about making money in 2026? KMUD and Black Ripple Events present a conference about drawing income from forest land in southern Humboldt. Making Money with Your Forest is an all-day conference at Redwood Playhouse on March 14th, 2026 that explains the benefits that benefits KMUD and the Southern Humboldt Fire Safe Council. Experts will explain how to make a large profit by applying for grants and carbon credits that cover all the work needed for fire safety and forest health on your parcel. Workshop list, sign-ups, and more information can be found at blackrippleevents.com. And the Humboldt Superior Court impanels 19 citizens, known as the Humboldt County Civil Grand Jury, to act as independent investigative body of the judicial system each year. They hope to fill their open 19th seat and finish the second half of the 25-26 term strong. Applicants should have a desire to serve their community and have free time in the next 6 months. For more information, or if you have any questions about the application process, please contact Humboldt Superior Court Administration at 707-269-1204. Two excellent, unrelated, but useful promos. Thank you.
Okay, so we're back. From 7:30 till the end of the show at 8 o'clock, you're invited to call in with questions related to this month's discussion on fertility or infertility, whether you're male or female. And yeah, I'd like to hear from people that are listening, what it is that's on their mind. Maybe if you have any ideas for future discussion that can also be posted on the YouTube channel in the discussions, go ahead. I just want to see how many people are listening, how many people are interested. I get calls from people and emails from people that I didn't know were listening at the time, and it's always good to remind us that sometimes when people don't phone in, it doesn't mean to say they're not listening, but it's good when I get emails and other notifications from people and people asking me about things I talked about on the radio show last month, etc., etc. So we've been doing this for 22 years now, and I don't think we're planning to stop anytime soon. But let me just carry on with tonight's discussion on fertility. So. Female. Let's just start with female factors. No preference here, but just choose females first. So the things like age and the quality of egg production, and the quantity also, because this declines significantly, especially after 35. With ovulation disorders being one of the main reasons for fertility. Then, so we mentioned PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, thyroid issues, high prolactin, extreme weight. Or under or over. Obviously for female athletes, they typically lose their menstrual cycles, so very thin, wiry, muscly female athletes can often lose their menstrual cycles. So, like I said, major excessive exercise can certainly disrupt regular egg release. And then uterine or cervical issues like fibroids, polyps, adhesions and scarring that can happen. These things can also block sperm or implantation. And then fallopian tube damage, often from infections, which is pelvic inflammatory disease or endometriosis, or sexually transmitted disease in general, causing inflammation and fibrosis and scarring. And then endometriosis, which is the uterine tissue growing outside the uterus, which can cause scarring and blockage. And then male factors, things like sperm issues, like low sperm count, poor motility, abnormal shape, often linked to age, genetics, as well as infections and or lifestyle. Obstruction issues with males, blockages in the reproductive tract, i.e. from infection or surgery, and then hormonal disorders affecting the same as women, but affecting sperm production and or with women affecting the ovulation cycle. So for shared, as well as lifestyle factors affecting both men and women, age, so decreasing egg quality for women and sperm quality and quantity for men. Smoking and alcohol reduces conception chances and sperm quality. Weight, being overweight or underweight, disrupts hormones and ovulation and sperm production. I mentioned sexually transmitted infections, things like chlamydia and others can cause pelvic inflammatory disease, damaging reproductive organs. And then environmental factors, exposure to pesticides, solvents, radiations. And then stress, just simple stress, can affect reproductive hormones, and that in its own right can totally result in infertility. Okay, so if we want to look at kind of key fertility issues. So the primary infertility would be described rather as having never achieved a pregnancy. A secondary infertility, then the inability to conceive after at least one previous pregnancy, and then miscarriage associated increased risk with age and genetic factors. So what is a healthy menstrual cycle? I think we should go through this because I think it's not always true that people understand it, and that actually there's a lot of women who perhaps don't even understand their menstrual cycle. It's just part of what happens and they don't really question it. I do consult with people regularly that we uncover things that are related to their menstrual cycle they never realize or never recognize, and there are plenty of herbs that can affect and correct dysfunctional menstrual cycle. So if we're talking about fertility, this would be one of the first things. What is the length of your menstrual cycle, and any quality related to it that would be bad or needing to be corrected, that would certainly result in infertility, in inability to produce a follicle, and or for that to become implanted. So essentially a healthy menstrual cycle should be a 28-day cycle. Okay, let's just keep it at that. I think you can look online. I think you can find a range from
25 to 35. I mean, you can say that's normal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, 25 to 35 days. You can
Well,
say
35 is not normal, nor 25.
Well,
So I don't
I mean, it's
understand how that.
not. I mean, it's like normal because the population is generally unhealthy,
Right.
and so that's become normal. But you can still have a healthy ovulation with a 35-day cycle if everything else is healthy. But yes, your body likes to stick to the moon cycle, and they say 50% of women ovulate on. If a woman ovulates in accordance with the moon, 50% of them ovulate on the new moon, and 50% ovulate on the full moon. And our bodies like to follow the moon cycle. Now, that's not exactly 28 days all the time, but it's, around that amount of time, and it's pretty regular. That's a regular driving force for healthy menstruation, is following the moon cycle.
I think what I'm trying to get at is, unless a woman is really aware of her ovulation, either through measuring her basal body temperature and looking for a spike, or using an LH strip and seeing when that happens as a preempting follicle release, if you're not looking at that, then if you have a 35-day cycle or a 25-day cycle, you're probably not going to know when you are fertile, because you won't really know when you've ovulated.
Right, and a lot of women don't know when they ovulate.
Right.
And there can be differences that are healthy, like, maybe it's not 2 weeks from the first day you bleed to the day of ovulation is 2 weeks, and then you can say from your ovulation to the next day of your bleed is another 2 weeks. Well, the variation can be very normal to have, a 10-day from the first day of your bleed to ovulation, or 18-day from first day of bleed to ovulation. That can be the normal variation. But once you ovulate, from then until you bleed, that's a pretty strict timeline for health. I mean, it can change, right? You can have a short luteal phase, which is where you ovulate, and then a week later, you're bleeding, and that's a problem. But you can have a healthy variation in the first part of your cycle. The second part of your cycle really should be from ovulation to bleed. That should be 14 days. And if that varies, you either have
Deficient
luteal, which can be deficient progesterone, excessive estrogen, polycystic ovaries. I mean, there's multiple, and ovulation. You might not have ovulated, actually, so you didn't really have that 14-day period because you never really ovulated. So there's so many things. But when we say a healthy cycle is 25 to 35 days, well, you have to say a healthy cycle would be from ovulation to bleed, has to be the 14 days. The first part of the cycle can vary, and it can still be a healthy variation.
Okay, so what is a healthy cycle? How should it be? Essentially, if you think about it this way, the follicular phase, I'll term it the follicular phase, so follicle. The follicular phase, estrogen rises, thickening the uterine lining as follicles mature in the ovary. Okay. Then ovulation. An egg is released around day 14, as Sarah said, of a 28-day cycle and travels to the fallopian tubes. It's fertile for about 12 to 24 hours. That would be the optimum time to have sex and expect to fertilize that egg, and things go well, it'll get implanted into the uterine wall and conception will begin. So the luteal phase then is the progesterone phase, where progesterone prepares the uterus. If no pregnancy, the hormone levels drop, causing menstruation. And then menstruation, the uterine lining sheds, beginning a new cycle. So that's a 28-day cycle. From the first day of bleeding to ovulation should be 14 days, and then the luteal phase from 14 to 28 days, where progesterone is high, is the luteal phase. So you're looking at the estrogenic phase from 0 to 14 days, where estrogen rises, and day 14, the spike in progesterone and luteinizing hormone with the preponderance of progesterone secretion for the next 14 days. That's a healthy menstrual cycle. Now, there's plenty of terms, and when we were studying herbal medicine in our first year or two, when we were looking at herbs, obviously, and the endocrine system is very well treated with herbs. Herbs have a very natural way to interact with us in an endocrine basis, hormonally changing things. Let me just get this next caller. We'll take this caller first, and I'll pick up where I left off with the menstrual cycle and the herbs and the terminology. So, caller, you're on the air. Where are you from, and what's your question?
I'm from Berkeley. My name is Lori, and I'm sorry it's not about the beginning of life.
Okay, no problem.
But I'm going to be talking to my Kaiser doctor in a few days, and I want to talk to you first.
Go ahead.
Blood tests and my triglycerides were very high.
Oh, yeah.
Like 200, 235.
Okay.
And I've been eating PD for probably 3 years.
What was that you ate, Laurie?
Ray PD. I was eating in the PD way, I'm saying.
Oh, eating a peat diet?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I'm just wondering what your recommendations are. Poking around in the peat literature, there was stuff about niacinamide helping.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I am taking, Dr. Mercola has a niacinamide that's 50 milligrams. He recommends taking 3 times a day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing that. And I started exercising at a gym.
I don't mean to butt in. It's a very pertinent subject, because just in the last 2 months or so, I've got a pretty wide range of people with cholesterol issues, some of which have responded really well to herbs, some of which don't seem to respond that well. And it's actually the thinner females that are exercising more, and they generally, I have a harder time with them getting their triglycerides down.
I'm not thin. I'm probably 25 pounds overweight.
Okay. How old are you?
76.
Okay. And what's your total cholesterol?
Oh, gosh. It was over 200. I can't remember.
Was it, go on, was it 250 or was it closer to 300?
I think it was closer to 300.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know what your HDL or your LDL fraction was?
Oh, gosh, I didn't pull that out. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Okay. So how long have you...
What about, Lori, what about your liver function tests, like your liver enzymes? Is your liver happy?
I don't know. And what would be the test?
That's called an AST and an ALT.
AST and ALT?
They're almost always done on basic metabolic panels, so I'm sure you've had that measured. Sarah's just wondering, those things, the AST and ALT, what ALT specifically might be on the higher end of the reference range if your liver is unhappy. I mean, I'm not talking about overtly...
it doesn't have to be like hepatitis or
disease.
Any kind of well, it shows that there's inflammation, but it doesn't have to be serious inflammation. You can have an elevated ALT and AST from eating PUFAs. So it's the alanine transaminase and the aspartate aminotransferase. That's what those acronyms are.
I've had very little PUFAs for, 3, 4, maybe 5 years. Mm-hmm. Not completely none, but very, very little.
Do you use thyroid hormone?
Yes, I'm taking T3.
Okay, how much T3 are you taking?
I'm taking, let's see, how much am I taking?
I am taking, I'm taking Sinomel, and it's, the pills are 25 micrograms, and I was taking 1.5 every day, but then the place in Mexico is no longer supplying it. I can no longer get it from Mexico, so because I'm afraid of running out, I'm trying to get Kaiser to give it to me. I'm only taking the 25 micrograms divided in half.
Right.
And do you eat a lot of saturated fats or just kind of like a low-fat diet? What kind of diet do you have?
I don't need a lot of saturated fats. I do coconut oil, but I'm not super low fat, but I'm also not super high.
Okay.
Well, the other thing that I would say is definitely worth looking at. I mean, you've mentioned niacinamide, and obviously Dr. Pete was pretty invested in that as a good triglyceride reducing vitamin. But
Okay.
he also,
I mean, all the B vitamins are really good for helping lower cholesterol.
Specifically niacinamide. He always talked about that one as the
I
best.
also take a B complex,
Okay.
along with niacinamide. Yeah.
Yeah, from an herbal medicine perspective, definitely bitter herbs. So looking at, why Sarah probably mentioned what your ALT was, as a measure of liver function. So bitter herbs, things like artichoke, Cynara scolimus, the globe artichoke, an extract of that, as well as coleus for scoliae, has got some pretty good research. I've definitely had some people's numbers come down with both coleus and Cynara. Dandelion, again, a dandelion root as a cholagogue, that would improve your bile production from your livers, because that bile emulsifies fats. Then obviously making sure that your enterohepatic shunt is not slow, so that you don't suffer from constipation, and the transit time is relatively quick, so that you don't reabsorb endotoxin.
I'm taking Cascara sagrada.
Good. Yeah. Okay.
Is that a bitter?
No, it's not. It's not.
If you
It's
chewed
not really
it,
a bitter.
yes,
It's
but if you
not a
just
true bitter like gentian
It
root.
tastes pretty bitter.
Yeah, it's not a true bitter like gentian root. So it's.
And then what about fibers? Like, have you experimented with oat bran, or well-cooked mushrooms, or even psyllium seed husk powder?
Yeah,
No.
Yeah,
Because those fibers can help soak up a lot of waste products that are in your intestines, as well as extra fats. And Dr. Pete was a big proponent of making sure people had fibers, whether it was raw carrot, well-cooked mushrooms, oat bran in their diet. And psyllium husk, you avoid the PUFA from the psyllium seed if you do the psyllium husk. And that's another bulk fiber that helps you.
Oh, I can do that. Yeah, the raw carrots kind of upset my stomach. They're not appealing to me.
Okay, well, you need to listen to that. I mean, Dr. Pete wanted to say he didn't really have a diet that he proposed. You know how it goes, right? He wants people to, figure out what works for their body.
Well, the psyllium husk I could easily do.
Yeah, just make sure with that you take plenty of liquid, because it can be very drying if you don't get enough liquid with it. So
I know you can get backed up at first.
So lots of water with that husk powder.
Have you ever been able to do anything about your weight? And you said you're 25 pounds overweight, so you're the opposite end of the asthenic kind of exercise, regular exercise, female postmenopausal. But you're 25 pounds overweight. Have you what if any exercise are you able to do that's gentle weight-bearing exercise, non-aerobic, to do something about your weight in conjunction with blood sugar modulating herbs that will control your blood glucose? Because I definitely have had people with success who've lost weight as the kind of genesis of their high cholesterol.
Andrew, I think I'm going to call and set up an appointment with you.
That's fine. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Because this is a pretty long call.
No problem.
And it sounds like you've got some to offer me.
Yeah, I've got plenty of experience with it, for sure. Just go ahead and email me, andrew@westernbotanicalmedicine.com. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie.
I had a
Okay.
bitters question. Does radicchio, like the salad green or other bitter
Yeah,
salads, is
yeah.
that a good source of
Any
Yeah, Andi, radicchio, you know,
and
I mean,
bitter,
even
bitter melon, like in your Chinese food?
Yeah, more to go. Anything that has a bitter taste elicits that.
even dandelion leaves.
Parsley?
That's not really bitter, but, you know, dandelion leaves are bitter.
Yeah.
The other thing that,
It's all about the cranial nerve response to that bitter taste that elicits that generation of stomach acid, bile
Really?
production.
Oh.
so even like endive, if you grow, or arugula, if you grow arugula in your garden, it's always a lot more bitter than
Yeah.
if you buy it at the store, and that is a bitter herb. I mean, you don't, depending on your digestion, if you can handle fresh greens, you know, a little bit goes a long ways. All you need is that brain stimulation. I mean, even beer is bitter, right? It has the bitter hops in it. Hops is a bitter that we use as a tincture.
An aromatic bitter.
So, you know, there's
We're not-
ginseng.
We're not recommending you drink
you
beer. though.
just want a beer.
I don't like beer.
No, we're not recommending it. Don't
Well,
worry.
I'm just saying, you
It's
know,
too
that
estrogenic.
Yeah. Yeah.
it does act as a bitter. The bitter greens and salads can act as bitters. You
Yeah,
can
but there's
drink
pure bitters.
your little aperitif digestif that has ginseng and acorius in it, and all those
Absinthe.
bitter. You know, there's absinthe, wormwood.
You guys,
those are bitters.
You guys sell a bitters tincture?
We used to
used to
make
have
a
one,
bitter, like a Swedish bitters, and we did make a more digestive one as well.
You
But
should
now it's
sell
just
it at the
custom.
local bars. You should make a batch for all your customers, but also have it available. I guarantee you that they will keep it at Stone Junction. They might not go through it quickly, but
Yeah, there
That would be
is a bitter alcoholic bitter drink that they add to some cocktails. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's all
Yes,
herbal
yes.
based.
Yes, right.
That's
it's very popular.
Angostura bitters.
Oh, that's it, Angostura bitters.
Yeah, yeah,
and that's
yeah.
all ginseng and all those and absinthe all added into it. I don't know what cocktail they make with it, but I have heard of that.
yeah, no, they have several different kinds of bitters. Actually, I know for a fact. I was sniffing them all, and they're medicinal and traditional and new wave, and I think you guys would do a great one.
Okay, well, thank you for your call, Laurie. Go ahead and
you're
email
welcome.
me
Thank you
anytime.
for your time.
Yeah,
All right.
anytime.
Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor, KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM from now until 8 o'clock. And people are invited to call in with any questions related to fertility, whether it's male or female. We'll go through the outline that I've drawn up definitely for next month too. We're not going to get anywhere near through it tonight, but we'll get through to that. And then, like I said, if people want to call in with anything unrelated to fertility, if they have any other questions surrounding herbal or alternative medicine, I'll be happy to answer questions. And as I said, you know, we've been in practice for 26 years now, 27 years, so I've got a pretty wide range of experience in people with many different types of chronic conditions as well as acute. So getting back to the whole fertility side of things for females, they have a very specific biologically determined hormone flux. So it's a cycle between estrogen and progesterone. And as anybody who's been listening to our shows for the last, since 2007 with Dr. Pete, Dr. Pete was always very adamant that estrogen was very inflammatory, water retentive, energy draining, pro-cancer, and that progesterone actually was that youth hormone that conferred radiance and fertility and everything about feeling good and looking beautiful. When you look at a woman in the second trimester of a pregnancy, once they may have got over their morning sickness perhaps, but you're looking at them, people will say, wow, your hair looks really good, or your nails look great, or your skin looks wonderful, and that's progesterone. That's the bloom of progesterone as an anti-inflammatory hormone of youth. So looking at a menstrual cycle, the first half is estrogen dominated, second half is progesterone dominated, and if you don't know that you're ovulating on day 14, it's going to be difficult for you to time your activity with producing the most conducive situation for fertilization of an egg.
And there's definitely, while Sandra says, the second half of the cycle from ovulation to bleed is the progesterogenic phase. Many women think it's normal to have painful periods and to have breast tenderness and to have PMS, moodiness before their period. Many women just consider that a normal side effect of being a woman. Well, let me tell you, it's not. That is an excess of estrogen in relation to the progesterone, and there are lots of different things you can do with your health to change that and make it more normal, which is no pain, not heavy bleeding, no breast tenderness. So if you're trying to conceive and you have all of those symptoms, it would be a good idea to try to get those corrected and normalized before you try conceiving.
Okay, if you look in the literature, just to bring this up, surrounding the menstrual cycle, there's at least 3 different terms, and there's probably more than that, 4 or 5, which are the irregularity side of what would be otherwise normal. So you've got things like menorrhagia, excessively heavy bleeding. You've got metrorrhagia, which is kind of in between cycle bleeding. Let's see, what else is there? Oligomenorrhea, okay, or amenorrhea. So you have kind of
no bleeding.
Absent periods. This is typically what happens with athletic females, for example, or women that have PCOS. They could go months and months without a period. So lots, the hormones are operating on such a small biological concentration compared to other substances in the body that it's not difficult to disrupt them, and we've done plenty of shows on things like plastics and environmental estrogens and endocrine modulators that operate on picogram levels of 10 to the 12 concentrations, or 0.000, 12 zeros and a 1. So it's not difficult to imagine that plastics in the environment and or contraceptive hormones in drinking water
or hormones in the meat.
Yeah, at tiny concentrations can have profound effects, because that's how the human body is operating. So it's not difficult to imagine that waste, etc., in the environment can affect women seriously. And the same way for men and men's fertility and men's sperm count and quality over the years. They talk about a 50% reduction in fertility in the last 50 years. I mean, we're talking some pretty serious numbers here. It's not just a small anomaly. It's a very clear downward trend. And obviously, the easiest thing to relate it to is to an increasingly toxic environment. And the things that we put in our mouth, that we breathe, that we work with, are all part and parcel of disrupting our hormones.
When my daughter went to horse camp a couple of years ago, she said one of her, the other girls in the cabin said they went to fast food restaurants for breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. That was just normal. So, diet has a huge part to play, and the toxins in our food from big agrochemical companies allowing or putting this stuff in our food, all of this is affecting women's health, men's health, and general chronic disease as well.
Okay, so for the menstrual cycle itself, then, there's obviously these kind of cycle irregularities. And we talked about 28 days as being a perfect cycle, with the first 14 days and then ovulation on day 14, and then 14 days of progesterone. And if nothing happens with fertilization, the endometrium sheds and bleeding begins, and you have a 3 to 5 day bleed, and it all starts all over again. So if the cycle is under 21 days or over 35 days, that's obviously a warning sign. There's something aberrantly wrong with the hormones that are the messenger system for this tissue change to occur. And then bleeding changes, as we mentioned, things like menorrhagia, extremely heavy bleeding with clots and lots of pain. I've talked to many women who have had basically a day off. They've got one day in their cycle where they just don't go to work because it's just too bad, or they just bear with a lot of pain. And then obviously there's a ton of women who have very normal cycles. So I see both ends of the spectrum, and so it's very clear when someone has all of these things that are definite issues, that there's something wrong with their hormones. And it's very easy to treat. It's not difficult. So I would encourage anybody listening to do some research. Obviously, I'm open for consultation, but do your research and see there's a wealth of information for alternative medicine, which I think is the best treatment going for these hormone aberrations, because herbs are so gentle and so profound at the same time. in changing things, but changing it beautifully and not in a very harsh way by just giving a specific isolated hormone, for example. There's definitely better ways of doing it and much more tolerable and natural than synthetic chemicals. So pain, you shouldn't really get any pain. You get some discomfort around menstruation for sure because you're bleeding, but you know what? It shouldn't really be painful. Pain is related to prostaglandins, and prostaglandins are pro-inflammatory. They're all promoting that cramping and that vasoconstriction and all of the things that are, you know, typical for women that pass clots, etc., during heavy menstrual cycles. As well as persistent pelvic pain, and this brings us to the kind of subject of pelvic inflammatory disease that we mentioned. So this again, through chlamydia, which is relatively prevalent, is definitely one of the main causes of PID. Now, the other issues with ovulation then, spotting before a period and absence of ovulation signs, or very short luteal phases, the short second half of the cycle can certainly alter a person's ability to get pregnant. And then fertility signs, which for a woman are really easy to see, and most women, I hope that most women are really involved with their menstrual cycle and knowing their bodies, because quote unquote women, want to say that they are more intuitive and more in tune with nature, and I can get that. It's a female thing. Females are nurturing, and I think more females are more interested in nature and beauty and that kind of thing. So knowing your signs, your egg white discharge, is very normal. Something that would normally be showing that a woman was fertile and ready for, trying to make a child. So low ovarian reserves and short cycles with no egg white, that would also be very kind of alarming, because that would be a clear indication that hormones will not work in the way they should be, and that the woman, for whatever reason, is just not fertile.
And also you can just have an excess amount of estrogen, and that can disrupt the normal cervical fluid that is required for fertility, and so it can go both ways.
So your basal body temperature, we've talked lots and lots about temperature and pulses with Dr. Pete, and checking your metabolic rate, and especially for measuring your own metabolic rate to see how well your thyroid's working in relation to food. So basal body temperature, women who want to use natural birth control for sure, will look at their basal body temperature, and around day 14 or 13, when the LH spike happens, you should get a defined rise in body temperature, discernible from background temperatures. Once you've been doing this for months, you'll know where your basic background temperature is, and that spike by a half or 3/4 of a degree, say, will be a fairly clear sign that ovulation had occurred. And then, go on.
I think a really good book, if women are interested in reading up about your cycle and how it works, is called Taking Charge of Your Fertility, and it's written by Tony Welshler. It's everywhere on the internet, Taking Charge of Your Fertility. That's a really good book to teach you how to spot the signs and know what's happening with temperatures, and not necessarily pulses, but your temperature and your signs of ovulation.
Okay, so we've talked about some of those kind of physical signs. So the cramping, this kind of Mittelschmerz, what the Germans termed for this mild cramping, and then breast tenderness, as you've mentioned, again related to hormones and increased libido. These would be things that you would expect from a healthy, quote-unquote, ovulation and a desire for reproduction. So these would be, these are kind of all good points and bad points about what a quote-unquote normal menstrual cycle would be, and also things that you'd expect to see if things weren't working properly. So I think what we're going to be 4 minutes before the top of the hour. So let me just tell you what we'll get into next month. I'll basically go through some of the causes of irregular cycles, some of the pathological changes, and as well as some of the hormone changes, and then obviously talk about the reasons for this, and then for this in male health too, for sperm-related issues, and then we'll go through the herbs that are used commonly for changing hormone patterns in females. These things will include things like Vitex, as we've mentioned in previous shows, but Peony lactiflora, Angelica sinensis, obviously those things that control bleeding, like Capsella, yarrow, etc., etc. So anyway, so next month we'll hopefully get into some of the herbs. But what I would say is that if anybody's listening and they want to discuss any more related to fertility or infertility, we can be found at westernbotanicalmedicine.com. My name's Andrew Murray, and my email is andrew@westernbotanicalmedicine. Sarah?
Thank you for listening. My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Happy New Year, and have a good night.
Okay, so all of you until February of 2026, good night, and we'll speak then.
This program is copyrighted. All rights are reserved. Reproduction in whole or in part without the express prior written consent of the owner is